Welcome back on the AM show. Today being a Friday, well, we're also going to be contemplating what former President John Mahama has hinted at in terms of the approach his administration will adopt in dealing with corruption in Ghana. The former president has placed the fight against graft high on his agenda in the build-up to the 2024 election. Speaking during the launch of his flagbearership campaign for the NDC, Mr. Mahama said he had his eyes set on dubious activities he said were being perpetrated by the ruling government. Well, this morning, to dilate on those matters, we have Member of Parliament on the ticket of the National Democratic Congress, Dr. Clement Apak, on the show this morning. Doc, a very good morning to you.
Good morning. Let me say it's a pleasure to be here. It's been quite a while.
It has.
I remember the last time.
I thought you had abandoned us.
No, certainly not. As you know, we went on recess, and as is expected, I had to spend a good deal of time with my constituents, listening to them, appreciating the issues, and planning how I would advocate them. And since we came back, we've been very busy in Parliament. And as astute as you are, I know you've been following the developments. So it's a pleasure to be here. And I agree to all the viewers, particularly my constituents of Bulsa South. So Bulsingamena, Mapusi. You know my constituency party has made the decision to let me contest for the 2020 election unopposed. So I currently have no competitor in the primary. So obviously I thank them.
You mean 2024?
Yes.
2024.
Yes, I am by default the candidate of the NDC. So I've already, if you like, I've gotten a free pass, which is exciting. So I must show gratitude.
That says a lot about the confidence the people have in you, doesn't it?
Yes, it does, and I don't take it for granted.
How did they come by this decision? Because I know in your constituency, obviously there would be, even among those who are supporters, aficionados of your party, there would be those who also feel, well, you've been there, you've done that. Maybe Doc has not been able to deliver as much. I've heard people also rail against you. So by what constituency did they arrive at this decision? How was it done?
Well, you know the way the processes work. The first phase is determined by only members of the party. And given my record, I believe that I had done sufficiently well to merit their decision not to encourage somebody else to contest. It's not as though, there are no prospects or we don't have persons in the party from our constituency who can do the work. But both those who can do it and those who are the kingmakers have all connived, so to speak, in deciding that I should go again unopposed. And this is not the first time. In fact, the previous election as well, I was the sole candidate. I didn't have to contest.
When was this, 2020? Or 2020?
In preparation for the 2020 election.
Right.
I went unopposed. And in preparation for the 2024, I am going unopposed. I am not going to say that I've been able to do all the things that I want to do or the people expect me to do. But at least they know I've honestly and genuinely done my best under very difficult circumstances. And so I'm not perfect like any other human being, but I think they have weighed the options and they have decided that I've done sufficiently well to merit this honor done me. And I don't take it for granted. So I am not surprised. Of course, some will rail against me, but they still think that I should be their de facto candidate for the coming election. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful.
When you look at that constituency, having served them in the past and looking forward to serving them in the future. I know we're going to be talking about the former president and his campaign.
Yes, that's correct.
All of that. But whenever I have someone come here who represents a constituency, I like to push them for them to tell all of Ghana what they have done in the past, what they hope to do, what is wrong, what has been done right, and basically how we can do more for the people. So over to you. In a nutshell, what would you say, especially as we approach Independence Day?
Yes. You see, mine is a rural constituency, largely agrarian. So farming is the main economic activity, in spite of the mantra and sing song about, one district, one factory. Bulsa South doesn't have a factory. We have one, but it is privately owned in rice processing. So my main focus has always been in the area of education and healthcare, and of course, the empowerment of the youth and women. But the issues that affect most of the country are not present in Bulsa South. So we talk about challenges to do with... So
the same challenges you face as well.
Road networks, inadequate health facilities, inadequate educational facilities, and if you like, the sheer lack of opportunities for young men and women. But I have focused a lot more on education and healthcare, largely because I believe that if you have an educated, healthy population, at least that then serves as the foundation for them to also be able to thrive and explore their God-given potential. So I renovate schools. I have built new schools as we are speaking. There is a KG block that is almost completed at one of my communities known as Zwasa in Bulsa South. Yes. And then, the issue of furniture deficits procure.
Honorable Ocheko.
Oh, yes. But I love it when... You know me. I am a vandal. So I am a vandal. Our motto is truth stands.
Oh, you know I'm an old vandal too.
Very well. Okay. So you know the way we are. We don't say things that we have not done. And when we are wrong, we admit. So I know I've fallen short. Perhaps I could have done a lot more. But given the circumstances and the conditions and the nature of our politics, where when you belong to the ruling party, you tend to get a lot more of your request fulfilled compared to when you are not. And indeed, the lack of fluidity in the disbursement of the common fund, these are challenges. But I'm doing well in terms of helping youth get employment, some getting recruited into services and teaching, helping women groups with soft loans. I'm going to be disbursing some 40,000 when I go. This should have been done earlier, but the district director of Agric, who was supposed to have done that on my behalf through my social intervention fund, misapplied the funds, and later on I heard that he had passed on. So I now have to look for my own private resources to deal with that. And then we are drilling boreholes. We continue to repair a number of them because water is life. I've just spent some 54,800 of my own personal resources fixing 28 boreholes, and I'm going to be drilling another 10. So I continue to do my best under the circumstances. And I believe that the people appreciate the effort, knowing the general predicament of the nation and the challenges thereof.
So tell me, your common fund, for example, you speak about how late it tends to come. Do you think we should legislate on that, maybe in a way, as a member of parliament, so that we can stem the tide of, oh, you're not in power, so we're going to constrain you in certain ways, like we've heard your membership in parliament complain about from time to time?
Well, in terms of the common fund, I must say that it is not a challenge just for those of us in opposition. It is a challenge for every member of parliament. And
it's a general challenge, but I'm hinging my question on the fact that you said, especially when it comes to developmental issues, those in the majority likely would get more attention.
No, that is based on lobbying. This has nothing to do with the common fund.
Okay.
Because as a member of parliament, clearly by the constitution, we are not technically agents of development. That is supposed to be done by central government and indeed the district assembly. So, in fact, if we got it right, and I think that we have to work assiduously towards that, the assemblies should be the noodles of development in the districts. But in the way that our system has evolved since the inception of the Fourth Republic, and the very entrenched levels of poverty that we have tends to make the member of parliament an agent of development. And so what that also means is that you must go outside of your remit to try and see what other avenues you can explore, what doors you can knock on to try and get some of the needs of your people addressed. So in that context, clearly, if you are a vociferous opponent of the ruling government, you and I can appreciate how government officials will be adamant in helping you because they see you as somebody who is always on their neck, so to speak. So if, for example, I were to put in a request for a road to be fixed in my constituency as Clementa Park, a deputy ranking member of the Committee of Education, and my chair of the Education Committee, who is a member of the ruling party, guess what? Although my situation may be dire, by default, the likelihood that the chair of the committee, who is a member of the ruling party, would get his request granted versus mine is very high. So that's the point I am.
So those are some of the
make.
dynamics
Yes.
in there.
Yes.
Let's take a look at this issue before we move on, lest I forget. Though it's not in your constituency, it's close. A 93-year-old hospital facility in the Wilson North constituency, that district as well. And I read a story about it recently. 93 years old, I think it saw a facelift in 1970, then again in 1992, which tells you that if it's 93, it must have been constructed around 1930. Okay? And it's in a shambles, dilapidated. The structure is basically falling apart. What killed me was the fact that recently at the children's ward, guess what they found there?
What?
A snake.
Well,
so how does that wash on you, especially as we're approaching independence?
No,
66 years. And do you have any such situations in your constituency? With that, we'll wrap on you.
Yes, I agree. I think that it is depressing. It is depressing to know that this is the situation. And I don't doubt, because, Bulsa North, Bulsa South, we share a common boundary, we share a common culture, we share a common language. Not long ago, we were one district with two constituencies. I myself have been a patient at the hospital in Sandema. I have gone there to visit patients because I attended Sandema Secondary Technical School. And on a number of occasions where I've had very acute malaria, I had been admitted there in my days as a student. And I visited relatives there, I visited constituents there, because Bulsa South, we have a healthcare center. Ours has not been elevated to the status of a district hospital. And it is true that indeed, not a lot has been done to maintain the facility and to give it the status that it deserves. So I am not surprised. But clearly, this again brings to the fore where central government has failed. Because clearly, that is not the responsibility of a member of parliament. And I dare say that is even beyond the capacity of a district assembly. This ought to be a problem that we must place squarely and the blame squarely at the doorstep of government, and in particular, the Ministry of Health. How is it the case that we can have a district hospital that has not seen any improvement, any facelift over the years, to the extent that it is now becoming the abode of reptiles? Clearly unconscionable. It is an embarrassment. Look, let's not mince words. As we are going to celebrate independence, as you rightly said, after how many years of being independent? And these are the stories that we still have to tell. It means that we have not done well. So collectively, as a nation, we have a lot more to do. Right. As I said earlier, for Bulsa South, we are now getting to the stage where our healthcare center is going to be elevated to a district level. And I've been doing my best to support healthcare delivery, procuring mattresses and other facilities to support the establishment of a theater. And I can say that we have now, over time, been able to establish a theater. And for the first time, some surgeries were performed in the Fumbisi Healthcare Center. And I continue to support them. If Dr. Freeman is listening, he will bear me out. He's the district director of health in Bulsa South. So I continue to do my best, but a lot more needs to be done. A lot more needs to be done.
I like reflecting on thoughts from different angles, and even if someone shares a thought that is not technically right, I'll share it in the first place. Before we move on to Mahama, James Kweku Boffa is watching us live. He says, throughout this week, the host and panelists have been members of the opposition, Kwachio Fosu, Murtala Mohammed, Dr. Pak. Why? So you obviously don't even have your facts right, but I'll still be patient with you. Kwachio Fosu was not on my show. Murtala Mohammed was not on my show. He may have been on this network. He was not on my show. And let me just tell you something. What some of you do not know. And yesterday, I believe it was yesterday, that's why I had to issue a disclaimer. We had a conversation. We invited Al-Hassan Sueni, Member of Parliament for Tamale North, and we invited members of the MPP. We went through the communications process. They did not give us anyone, whether they were dragging their feet, unwilling to come, afraid to be pinned to the wall. But you throw the invitation. That is how it is done from both sides. If people don't come, there is nothing you can do. So what's the gentleman's name? James Boffa. Get your facts right before you start making allegations that you cannot substantiate. In any case, when we had the likes of Kwabena Japong and all the other MPP stalwarts, Kwabena Japong was on my show just a short while ago. We always interact with the likes of Kojo Poku, who is vying for the Flagbearership. Your own communications person, Richard Ahyangba, always comes on the show. I don't see you complaining. So let's be honest and let's be fair, especially when you don't even have the facts. I'll be patient with you like that. Anyway, let's continue with that conversation. So former President Mahama has launched his campaign, Mahama Ebo, Mahama Ebo, Mahama Aba.
Sanity.
But some keep asking, old Mahama, is there a new Mahama? Why would Mahama even want to put himself forward? Some people have suggested that if it weren't for the abysmal performance of the MPP, Mahama would have no business even trying to go for the presidency again. Let's start the conversation from there. How do you react to that?
Well, first of all, let me appreciate you and the network for giving me this opportunity to appear and also to speak in justification of why His Excellency President John Dramani Mahama, the former president, has decided to take another shot at becoming the president of the Republic of Ghana. We all witnessed, either in person or through the magic of audiovisuals, the launch yesterday in the Volta region. And I must say that the premise that you just put before me, to some extent, is justified. I am not making a reference to those who are questioning why he is coming. But I'm making a reference to the fact that the current Nana Addo Bawumia-led MPP government has really messed up in ways and manners that nobody could have anticipated. The current level of distress in the country, the high level of despondency, and the loss of hope by Ghanaians, largely due to the recklessness of the Akufo-Addo Bawumia-led government in the areas of the dissipation of public resources, reckless borrowing, and indeed sheer economic mismanagement, have indeed combined and conspired to make the return of John Dramani Mahama a good move. And I say so not because John Mahama is deficient, not because he doesn't deserve on his own to have made another attempt as he's making to come back. But if you listen to him very carefully during the speech, which I described as phenomenal and pace-setting at the campaign launch yesterday, he made it very clear that having the benefit of hindsight and having the benefit of experience, sitting back, listening, watching, advising, advocating, have combined to allow him to appreciate the severity of the challenge that Ghana faces, which is unsurpassed in the history of the Republic, and in particular within the parameters of the Fourth Republic. And look, it is obvious. You don't need to be a rocket scientist. This does not even require you to be a critical mind or analyst to appreciate the situation that we are grappling with. Just look at our debt to GDP. When the government, then in opposition, comes and makes proposals, mouth-watering proposals, promises heaven and earth, and then that group is given the power to govern, and you come and take a debt, a national debt, at 122 billion, and you balloon it to about 500 billion, and you have nothing significant to show for it. Clearly, you cannot expect the people to think that that is okay. I mean, look at inflation. As we speak now, consecutively, inflation is said to be around 54%. We hear it has dropped. But we all know that this is the highest level of inflation that we have ever had.
It's the highest in some decades. It's the highest.
I mean, as far as we know.
Right.
Should we speak about the strength of the Ghanaian currency vis-a-vis other foreign currencies, where we are in terms of the city? And we want to talk about...
the last I checked, we were slumping again, and the Lebanese pound was the only one that was worse than our currency. But it's not as volatile as it was last year, is it?
Well, yes. I mean, we are all happy if there are improvements. And remember, His Excellency said yesterday that he is not one who likes to revel in the failings of a government simply because they are his political opponents. And I think that is very profound. That is the mark of somebody who truly has the heart of a statesman.
In fact, he said that
the heart of a statesman.
He would have wanted this administration to perform well.
That is it.
Whether that is true or not.
No, it is, because it is collective. As we sit now, I mean, we are all suffering. The cost of living is going up. When you go to the market to procure food items, they don't give you a different price because you belong to the New Patriotic Party or the PNC or the NDC. When the roads are bad as they are and you are driving, your vehicle is not given a free pass in terms of its ability to survive over a long period of time. You heard recently that we are even having a shortage of critical vaccines. Those children who are being born, who will not get those vaccines that they need to be able to survive, are not MPP or NDC. These are Ghanaians. Our wars are in school. You and I have talked about this severally. When you owe capitation grants in excess of 45 million, and yet you only approve and allocate 11 million, when the request for the year in question is 61 million. It's our wars who suffer in the public schools. So when you look at what is going on in the Republic of Ghana, and you consider the experience that John Dramani Mahama has acquired, and you consider the fact that he has been out of office and he has had time to appreciate the issues, and you think about the fact that he has not been an armchair observer, time without number, he has proffered and suggested solutions, including admonishing and calling on this government to have gone to the IMF much earlier, walking upright, and not having to wait and to go there in a wheelchair, where today we are now begging, literally begging the Chinese, begging them, asking the Germans to intercede with the Chinese on our behalf so that they can put in a good word for us to get a bailout from the IMF that this government swore, fatwa, waving spears, never to go to. So yes, he may have had his time before, but the conditions and the circumstances that we face now require an experienced hand, somebody who has had time to sit back, reflect, do introspection, analyze the issues. And as he said, I mean, people have been calling on him, myself included. I am one of many who has been calling on him, as have many Ghanaians, for him to come back. So that at least, as he said, we can build the Ghana that we want. We can fix this country and we can repair Ghana and put it on the path of prosperity. And I think that it is a good call. I am glad, as are many Ghanaians, that he has responded to the call.
Let's talk about the fight against graft. He's made it one of his chief, campaign areas, if you like. And corruption is one of those things that were used to hang him. Corruption. In the Daily Guide today, he says, no family, friends, government again. That's what they say, the new Mahama. Those were some of the very things that were used against him when he was president of the land. What exactly does the former president mean when he suggests that he's going to tackle corruption? I mean, you look at the indices and, well, not much has changed since that time in terms of the corruption perception index. We saw the Afrobarometer report, which pointed to not perception, but real corruption figures out there. This was just last year. But what is the former president going to do, should he be given the nod, in fighting corruption?
Well, look, let's be honest. And I am not going to say what I'm about to say because I'm NDC or because I had the privilege of serving in government and serving President John Dramani Mahama as one of his presidential staffers. In fact, I was a deputy policy coordinator at the presidency in charge of operations, and I was part of the policy delivery unit. I know that when it comes to the record of fighting corruption in the history of the Fourth Republic, clearly, the Mills Mahama administration and the Mahama Emisata administration stands tall, because I was there, and it was part of my responsibility working with the late Daniel Batadam. We were in charge of the portfolio that had to do with good governance and the fight against corruption. So I know what I am talking about. And I can give you several examples. I can give you examples where, for the first time in a long time, a sitting president, a government, had to superintend and supervise over the prosecution of government appointees based on allegations of corruption.
The name that comes to mind, apart from all the claims that are made, Abu Gapele.
That is only one. You also remember the investigation that was conducted, in fact, at the instance of His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, into national service, which uncovered a lot of rot and graft that was going on, and people were prosecuted. There are many other examples that I can cite. And you see,
share some more of them with us, because I'm sure ordinary Ghanaians would also be saying, look, many more examples. You've spoken of Abu Gapele, you've spoken of the National Service Secretariat. If people are going to take the former president seriously, some work must be shown from the past.
Yes.
And what can be done in the present.
Are
there any others you can?
So I've just given you two examples for now, right? Compare that to this current government and president. Tell me one alleged act of corruption that has been investigated, where sitting government appointees have been held accountable.
But
and yet the allegations...
There have been exposés, there have been investigations conducted.
Well, by
people
who?
have been cleared.
Well, that is the problem. When you have a president who has a penchant to clear his appointees who are alleged to have been engaged in acts of corruption or who are being investigated for acts of corruption, he is, in fact, enhancing corruption.
But it is
not fighting corruption. Look, don't take it from me.
It has never been, just to clarify, you say when you have a president who has the penchant for clearing, it has never been the president himself clearing these people.
No, but he has made the announcement.
Been Shraj or the investigative.
Which of them? Which of them?
And others.
Which of them? I mean, we all know the.
Should I cite Charles Bissu? Should I cite
Charles Bissu?
The PPA.
You know.
There have been
the PPA boss is still standing trial.
Yes, but at a point in time, his assets were unfrozen and all of that.
Yeah. So why were his assets unfrozen?
Well, it was a judicial process.
In fact,
it had to do with the law.
it
was a technicality.
If that is it,
was exploited.
A technicality which was exploited. Does that mean that the resources that were found in his account, as per the Commission for Human Rights and Administrative Justice report, and he was asked to refund those monies. How did he get those monies? You are talking about Charles Bissu. You know that as we are speaking, the announced expose which brought about that issue, you saw the way it was done. In fact, I can tell you that Anas and his tiger eye, and most Ghanaians are not satisfied with the way this matter was handled. We all know the way that this matter could have been handled to ensure that those who were found culpable were held accountable. But look at the way it was done, just to give room for the issue to become a non-issue. And don't take it from me. Take it from our own uncle, the citizen vigilante, Martin Hamidou, who was the first special prosecutor ever, and indeed appointed by the current government. If you read most of his writings, even before he left office, one of the reasons that precipitated his decision to quit was that government appointees and officials, and in fact, at some point he made direct references to the president and the presidency, were putting impediments in his way, not allowing him to do his work. He will request information and he will not be given. Do you even want me to talk about how shabbily he was treated in terms of his request for manpower, in terms of investigators and prosecutors at his office? How did Martin Hamidou describe the president? He has named him the mother serpent of corruption. So it is very clear that Akufo-Addo Bawumia MPP government never really meant to fight corruption. They have not fought corruption, and they cannot fight corruption. In fact, corruption has become a social intervention policy under the Akufo-Addo Bawumia government, because they do it and they walk away free. Look at the issues of Galamsey. Your party chairman in the Ashanti region is implicated. The visuals are there. The evidence is there. Not only does he work, but the president actually pronounces a verdict indicating that Akunta mining was not culpable. And this is a matter that is even yet to be investigated.
And others came to put it into context that when the president said it, he said, as of now.
Really?
The person is not involved.
So is it the information minister?
He was saying at the time that as of that time he was speaking, I think it was a military event, that the Ashanti regional chairperson of the MPP was not involved in Galamsey.
Post-facto rationalization cannot be accepted.
Whatever was going on was not going on at that time. It wasn't extant. Was that wrong?
Post-facto rationalization. The president knows what he sees.
Right. Let's look at, again, I want to go back to this because I want us to get this clearly. I'm sure the people watching us, very discerning viewers, they are asking themselves still, you talk about some examples in the past, very few that you can talk about in terms of the fight against corruption from the NDC, and maybe nothing to show from the MPP like you painted. But in terms of tackling corruption, what is the former president technically, clearly, how is he going to fight this? I'll point you back to what the current president said and why people have become very, what's the word? It's almost as though people are becoming inured to all this talk. When you say, we want to see a lot more, we want to hear practically how you're going to do this. Do you remember when the current president said he would apply
the Anas principle? Yes. I remember very clearly.
The Anas principle, I do not know where it is now, but those are some of the reasons ordinary Ghanaians, when you say I'm going to fight graft now, they want to see palpably, how are you going to do it? What are you going to do? Which institutions are you going to set up? Peter Obi in Nigeria said he would set up a special prosecutor's, office and all of that. How is Mahama going to do it?
Well, you see, Mahama has a record, as I said. And he is also one who allows state institutions to function without interference. And if you are to fight corruption, that is very important. When you have a situation where an executive president or the executive does everything possible to influence the workings of state institutions. Clearly, you cannot fight corruption. And the example of the Special Prosecutor's Office, as I cited earlier, is one that you should be taken into account. Why do you set up the Office of a Special Prosecutor? And then you put impediments in the way of the Special Prosecutor when he tries to do his work. Look, don't even go far. We now have a new Special Prosecutor. I am sure you heard of the allegations to do with a sitting member of the Council of State who clearly benefited from not paying taxes by virtue of her influence. That discourse led to a commissioner of customs having to be relieved of his position. The special prosecutor came out very forcefully in taking on this issue. How far have we gone with that? So you have a government that is not willing to support even institutions that it has brought into being to do the work for which it promised us it was going to bring those institutions into being. And look, we see it all the time. Why do you think the president has also been nicknamed the clearing agent?
And so former President Mahama will do things differently?
He would let the state institution, he would let this. John Mahama even said it yesterday. And I know, those of us who have worked with him, we know that he means what he says. He does not interfere with the work of state and public institutions.
Right.
He allows them to do their work. And if you are to fight corruption, that is what you ought to do. Allow the CID to do its work. It shouldn't matter which government official has been accused or alleged to have engaged in acts of corruption. Allow the special prosecutor to do his work. It shouldn't matter whether the complaint has been filed against a sitting member of the Council of State who is known to be a financier of your party. Allow the BNI, now NIB, to do its work. When there are allegations of corruption in the computerized school placement system, you don't allow your Minister for National Security to write to the Ministry of Education to set up an internal committee to investigate when the BNI and the CID have been petitioned by the Director General of the Ghana Education Service. So President Mahama would allow the institutions to work. And if we can allow state and public institutions to do their work without the political interference, particularly by the executive, then we would be making a headway. One of the reasons why we have not seen much in the fight against corruption as far as the Akufo-Addo Bawumia NPP government is concerned is because of the deliberate effort that is made to interfere with the workings of state and public institutions. And look, let me say this. I am very saddened. I am very saddened. And I must say this and be blunt. In my own opinion, and what I've read and what I know from other jurisdictions, and even within the context of Ghana's history, public and state institutions under the Akufo-Addo Bawumia NPP-led government have been largely compromised. They are not doing the bidding of the people of Ghana. They are there to do the bidding of the NPP Akufo-Addo Bawumia. How is it that a former commissioner of the Electoral Commission will lose her job over procurement breaches, and yet her replacement, a current commissioner of the Electoral Commission, has also committed the same sin, and yet is in office?
Are you suggesting very quickly that should the NDC come back to power, that same stick is going to be used to hit Jean Mensah? Should the NDC come to power? Are you going to use the same stick?
I am saying that
no, I mean, you've
when John Dramani Mahama comes, as he has said,
if it's bad for the goose, then it must be bad for the gander.
We are asking for equity. We are asking for fairness. We are asking that the rules ought to be applied fairly, regardless of who.
So technically, the rule will be applied to Jean Mensah as well.
Selective
if
justice
is found to have,
of course, if there are procurement breaches, she should be held accountable. Why is it okay for Charlotte Osei to be held accountable for procurement breaches, and yet it is different or not okay for Jean Mensah to be held for procurement breaches?
So in tackling corruption, in tackling graft, in tackling the problems in the system, it means technically what you're saying is that should your party come to power, you're going to probe those issues and Jean Mensah's head would roll. That's what you're saying.
I say that yes, if there are offenses, they will be probed. I remember the John Mahama said that yesterday. He said that when he comes, he is going to investigate public expenditure. He made specific references to the recently released Auditor General's report on the COVID-19 expenditure. And are you not baffled? I mean, are you not shocked that a president who came into our homes every week during the pandemic to give us updates has been silent, stone cold, in commenting, even in person, not even on a Twitter handle, about the Auditor General's report on COVID expenditure, and perhaps even to take a cue from what the president of Malawi has done to signal and indicate to the people of Ghana that I will punish wrongdoing and I will hold my own appointees who have misappropriated, embezzled, misapplied resources that came into the public coffers to fight this pandemic. Are you not surprised that the president has chosen to go stone cold on this?
Let's stay on that, but from a different angle. He says, in tandem, that he is going to probe dubious activities by the current government. Now, I don't have a problem with that, whether the MPP is probing the NDC for wrongdoing or the NDC is probing the MPP for wrongdoing. If it is wrong, it is wrong. I mean, my mind goes back to Comenda, the sugar factory.
That's
Just
correct.
this morning, I was talking about it with my colleague Samuel Kojo-Brace, and you look at it and the sums of money we've pumped into it time and again. What value is the ordinary Ghanaian getting? Nothing. Your administration could not get it done. This administration has not got it done. Last year, Alan Chemating, who is now gunning to be flag bearer of the MPP, gave us the assurance it would be up, working, rolling, nothing to show. It's a rust bucket. Why do I bring it up in terms of dubious activities and corrupt practices? Look at Saglemi. The point has been made that there were so many, not infractions, but things that were done that were contrary to law in the funding, in the payments, and all of that. And so it is sitting there rotting. How are you going to ensure that in pursuing what ought to be pursued, legally speaking, whether it's a project or whatever, you don't leave us with so many more of these like we are seeing with some of the projects that have been abandoned? That is the angle I'm taking.
Well, I agree and appreciate, the point you are driving at. And I can tell you that the NDC has a record. President Mahama has a record. He has always believed that governance is a continuum. And once you invest public resources, it is the responsibility of your successor government to make sure that those public resources don't go to waste. And you see, I beg to differ to some extent with the issue of the Commander Sugar Factory. We did what we did, and we set it up to take off. Unfortunately, we lost power. It was our expectation, as was the expectation of many Ghanaians, that the current government would have taken it up from there, but they did not. And so, even if we perhaps were not able to achieve our goal as we set out to do, we worked assiduously. And if they had continued, I believe by now, it would have been serving the purpose for which we put the investment in for the benefit of the people. Sugar is one of the commodities that we import in huge quantities, spending good, hard-earned dollars to import. It wasn't just only going to reduce our reliance on importing sugar, but the levels of employment opportunities that it would have created certainly would have reduced the current levels of unemployment that we face in the country. You made references to settlement. Does it make sense that a housing project that, by and large, even looking at the visuals, was somewhere 90 and above complete, can just be left to rot? And we even know that there have been deliberate attempts to run it down so as to make it cheap to be sold off to private developers whom we know are affiliated to the current government. And it is not just in those two areas. There are many, many other areas that when we come, we are going to indeed take a comb, a fine comb, and comb through. One village, one dam. Colossal amounts of monies were invested. I come from the northern part of Ghana. Bulsa South is supposed to be a beneficiary of 10 dams. If you go there now and you ask that they should point you to where the 10 dams were constructed, many of us cannot, even me, the MP. I have not even seen 3, let alone to talk of 10, but people have been paid for that. So there is a lot that has gone on in the past 6 to 7 years that clearly has resulted in public resources being misused or being channeled
and so you're
into private pockets.
You're stating here on behalf of the former president that should he get the nod of Ghanaians, this case of an albatross around Ghana's neck in terms of abandoned projects. I've always said that even if there are criminal, liabilities in there, go along with the process, but let the people benefit from whatever.
That is exactly the philosophy.
You're sitting here stating on behalf of the president that that is the way he is going to go.
Yes, because
assuming he gets the nod.
Because your mama has always believed that public resources ought to be put to public use, and governance is a continuum. And indeed, the Constitution admonishes that you ought to continue with public projects when you take over. That is what the Constitution admonishes us to do. Look at the issue of the e-blocks. And as a member of the Education Committee, my side of the committee, not long ago, I think sometime last year, as you remember, we did a tour. We visited about 4 regions to see some of these schools. Some of them 80% complete, 90% complete. You remember the one famous one that we visited in the Volta region, where it was 99% complete, only a few fixtures, and it had been abandoned. It was only when we had visited that facility and in our engagement with the chief, where the chief challenged government. And you remember the comment that the president made in response.
Yes.
That is the type of attitude that we are talking about. And this is what Ghanaians can expect not to be done by John Dramani Mahama or his appointees.
I want to look all of you in the eye, ordinary Ghanaians. You are listening to Dr. Clement Tapak, Member of Parliament for Bulsa South, and this is what he's saying. I always like it when the politicians say this, because we'll get footage to hold you to.
I know.
When
and I'll be here
the time comes, and
to respond.
You don't live up to expectation. Now, the economy, it has always been crucial in terms of how Ghanaians have voted. And he speaks of the economic disaster, which could have been averted because we simply went a certain way that we should not have gone. This administration has blamed COVID-19 and the Russo-Ukrainian war. President Mahama, during his time, did not have it easy either.
Yes.
The economy was not rosy. The GDP factor, I think it's only in 2014 that we had that exceptional performance. All through, we had problems, even with oil GDP. We had Dumso and many other problems that bedeviled the ordinary Ghanaian. That also impacted the economy. What is John Dramani Mahama going to do so differently that will be better than the solid team the Vice President told us about? Do you remember?
Do we really have a solid team? Do we even have a team?
Well, you see, I'm premising it on this.
No, I get it. I'm only being sarcastic.
If this is what we're getting on the back of a solid team. I don't know what we would get with a team that maybe is liquid.
Well, but that should tell you that the definition of solid is relative. And don't be surprised, because for a government and a group that would define review as cancel, don't be surprised that solid would mean liquid. So as one of my young colleagues, lawyer Beatrice Annan has said, it is a liquid economic team. In fact, the economic team doesn't even exist. And you have heard the blame game. Some of their potential flag bearer aspirants, Alan Chermantin is saying that Bawumia is the leader of the economic management team. Bawumia's people, like Arnaud Dompre, is saying that it is Alan who was the head of the economic management team. So essentially, there has never been a team. Because if it was there, we shouldn't be in a predicament. Look, you spoke about Dumsor. Yes, there were challenges, but John Mahama made the bold step. And I remember very vividly when he addressed the state of the nation, that he will fix it. And indeed, he fixed it. Before we left office, Dumsor was fixed. In fact, the current vice president, on your own network, not this program, on your own network, made allusions to the effect that John Mahama and the NDC should not expect to be applauded, to be praised for solving a problem that we had caused. The video is there. But you were right, we faced challenges. And when we faced challenges, what did we do? Our challenges were precipitated by exogenous factors. You know, at the time, the global prices of our major exports had plummeted. Gold, cocoa, and even oil had plummeted. And that was when John Dramani Mahama made the wise decision to convene a national stakeholders forum on the economy at Senchi, where we developed the homegrown policy, which was then taken to the same IMF that our counterparts swore never to go, and that gave us a reprieve. And look, make no mistake, the foundation and the work, hard as it was, and politically disadvantageous as it was, what was done was what laid the foundation for the growth that we saw in 2017 and 2018. 2017 and 2018, the growth that we witnessed in Ghana was not as a result of any superior policy programs implemented by the current government.
Right. Because
these were all predicted. But the point I want to make is this. When he comes back, he has already assured us that there's going to be real and tangible investments in the area of agric. They keep talking about planning for food and jobs.
He had that opportunity before.
He was doing it. How far has it gone since he left? If you look at the records, fertilizer for planning for food and jobs were being smuggled in huge quantities across the borders to Burkina Faso at a time when our borders were supposed to be closed. Doesn't that tell you a story that there were internal, high-level connivers who were behind that? So yes, the economy continues to be a challenge. But if we look at the dollar at the time that the NDC was in power, the level of inflation, the level of national borrowing, and the major indices.
But these are all factors.
At the very minimum.
Admittedly, these are all factors that before the Russo-Ukrainian war, especially, were not where they were.
You see, I didn't want to go there because look,
that is a reality.
These are the most baseless justifications that one can ever conjure. Russia and Ukraine war, COVID-19, peripheral. COVID-19 brought to this government an extra 10 billion Ghana cedis that government would never have had. You have seen the Auditor General's report. What those monies were being used for. Are you happy with that?
Let's wrap the
Russia and Ukraine war.
Let's wrap the conversation.
Do we import salt from Russia or Ukraine?
Let's wrap the conversation.
Let me finish. If you look at the table of the first 10 countries that do business with Russia and Ukraine and import, Ghana is nowhere to be featured. So how do you blame? Why? They did covert jump over Burkina Faso and Togo, Ivory Coast, and suddenly land in Ghana. Are we the only country that is impacted by the Russian-Ukraine war?
You're speaking in the words of Vice President Bawumia.
Well,
you're using the same.
Yes, yes.
It could come back to bite you.
No, because we know that the excuses that we had were legitimate and genuine.
Right.
The excuses that they have are concocted.
In a minute, I just want you to address some lines from former President Mahama. He says, of course, I know how to do it because I've had time, I've been there, I've had time out of office to reflect and all of that. Merely staying away will not make you better. But he says he's had time to reflect. Basically, he's learned lessons. What lessons has he learned? Then again, he says Ghana demands experience, not experiments. Is that what he's referring to?
Yes.
And finally, ex-gratia. He says he will scrap it. How exactly is he going to go about that? In a minute.
Well, with the ex-gratia, it's a constitutional provision. And so clearly, as he said, constitutional processes will be triggered. And his goal is not just to reform the Constitution, because that will require activating the constitutional reform processes that have been put in abeyance, and including the ex-gratia. And I agree, because truly I have been a beneficiary of Article 71, both as a presidential staffer and now as a member of parliament. The disparity between those of us who hold Article 71 positions vis-a-vis public and civil servants is like night and day. And when you have a government which then even extends it by trying to bring in the spouses of the president and the vice president to become beneficiaries of Article 71, you have every reason.
So as a legislator,
would
you, because he says the executive, but then they would want it to extend to the legislature, the judiciary, and all of that. As a legislator, would you accept?
Yes, I will support that, because it is about equity and fairness.
All right.
And I believe that
it
is not equitable, it is not fair. And when he says that he is coming, he has the experience, it's about experience and not experimentation. I think the circumstances under which we find ourselves today in the Republic, where retirees are being given funny haircuts, clearly bear him out.
Dr. Park, we're grateful that you've taken the time to
It's a pleasure.
This morning. And like I said, we'll keep having these discussions from both ends, the ruling administration and your outfit as well. You are hoping to return to power. My only hope when I have these conversations with politicians, I always tell you, is that you stick to what you are saying.
Be assured, I'm a vandal, the truth will stand. And John Mahama is a vandal, the truth will stand.
Thank you, Dr. Park. Dr. Clement Park, Member of Parliament for Builsa South. He just joined us for a conversation. Up next on the AM show, we'll be telling you about Rehoboth Social Housing and its latest projects. If you're thinking housing, you want to stay for this conversation. Up next on the AM show. Do stay.